Good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
You got me in the southern mood. It's astounding to me, and we've said this over and over, how Tim's talk and how Joe's song fits into my talk like nothing I've ever seen. It's just like I really could sit down now. But I won't. I'll share it with you. You know, as we've been preparing for this John of God crystal healing bed to come in just 2 weeks, I've had some really interesting experiences with it. And one of the, I was talking with a friend who was wanting to sign up, and I saw her visibly kind of step back. You know, and I said, what's the resistance to it? And she says, well, I'm scared of what might happen. And I told her, I said, are you scared of stepping outside because the wind might blow across your arm and you would feel the breeze? I said, are you afraid to go up to the ocean because the ocean might lick your toes? I said, who is your God? So that's what brought me to this conception, the thought that came to me today, that I wanted to discuss who is your God? Because we are ultimately responsible for our relationship to what we call God. There are many, many, many names for it. The good news is that my particular God is completely open to an update or a makeover anytime I need to make those changes. And it's not that God needs changing. It's me that needs the work inside. It's my healing journey. It's my evolution. There may be some residuals in you as you're looking at your relationship with God, meaning, by the way, that responsibility here does not mean an overwhelming task such as a horrible corporate job or a burden of some kind of nastiness that we just don't want to even be bothered with, or even a good burden like a new puppy. This is about owning what you believe, what you know. So what kind of God do you have? If you do have remnants, some of us were raised in very dogmatic churches. There may be remnants of Jehovah. And Jehovah was, of course, the God of the Old Testament. And as I was thinking about it, I thought, you know, Abraham is what, 8,000 years ago. And of course, nobody knew how to read and write except only the priests and the secret magic schools and whatever. And so they went to these churches. Well, at that time, they probably didn't even have a church to go to, but they saw what they thought God was through what life showed them. So they determined that Jehovah was cruel and abusive and punishing and sadistic and immature and ridiculous, in my case, in my thoughts. But then Jesus came along 2,000 years ago to say, no, guys, that's all wrong. God is love. And we are the prodigal sons. There is nothing that we can't do that will make God angry or punishing or cruel or abusive. That's what we've collected from this ego-based world that has taught us our dark sides. And I just want to go over that because I had some sweet darling ask me, you know, I thought the dark side was stuff like serial killers. And no, it can be very, very minor. It can be anger and pissed off and irritation and feelings of revenge, and you know, it can be just a thought going through your head. It doesn't have to be anything extreme. It can be very, very light. But your dark side is your ultimate teacher. We walk with the dark and the light, and by bringing those two together, we become whole spiritual beings. One of the things I wrote here is the term, the fear of God. You remember in the old days, you heard that term. Well, that'll put the fear of God in you. For those of us, because you've sinned. Well, you know, we've in New Thought have discovered that in the Aramaic language, sin means making a mistake. That you shoot a bow, an arrow at a target, and you miss the bullseye. So with us being human beings and somewhat veiled to our greater self, we're on this journey to remember who we are. Of course we're going to make mistakes. That's just the way this life is designed. But then it occurred to me that when Jesus came in 2,000 years ago, and they saw the people that were there who went to hear him speak, who were on the Sermon on the Mount, and were beginning to get the concept, the seed was planted that God was love, that they knew that God was made in, is it that way? Man is made in God's image. So they projected that image onto Jesus. And I thought, it's practical. It's for that time, it makes sense to me that they would have thought that Jesus was God. And they did say he was the only begotten Son and all that stuff. Because at that time, can you imagine the fear that people were dealing with from the days of Jehovah? I mean, and they still didn't, right? They didn't, they're busy out there with their sheep and they're, trying to survive. They're not in a church looking at stained glass. The Bible maybe wasn't even written then. The New Testament was written, 150 to 300 years after Jesus died? And who would read it? Nobody knew how to read. It's just not been that. You got to put yourself in that perspective about what was going on. So Jesus was a warmer and fuzzier version than Jehovah. So have you ever looked at your beliefs, and who they belong to? Someone called me on it one time, and I don't remember the discussion, but boy, it was like she took a 2x4 to my head, and she said, "Jenny, whose belief is that? Is that yours or your parents?" And I tried it on for size. It's like, you try on your mother's favorite shoes when you're a baby and you clop around in the living room. Maybe the girls did. I don't know about you guys. If you did, hey, And they didn't fit. So your beliefs, thank you, your beliefs are kind of like that. You have to decide when you get to be a grown-up and you try on those shoes for real, is this something that I want to be a part of me? Do I really believe that I'm being punished if something doesn't work out like I want it to? I had that happen recently, and I told my friend, I said, my God does not punish. If I'm being led, punished, the challenge leads me to the conclusion that the belief I have is all wrong for me, where I am in my evolution at the moment, then I am being redirected. And by surrendering to what is, allowing what is, and being grateful for what I have, then all of a sudden things miraculously shift. I wonder how many of you could tell me stories about that shift, and how many people in your life were confronted by something really, really frightening, and then it shifts on a dime because you said, okay, all right, whatever it takes, I'll do it. I'll surrender my will to you. I know you're wiser than I am. I don't have a clue how to get through this life. Okay, I'll do it. And it shifts instantly. With a phone call, it reminds me of a friend in AA years ago who called her sponsor and she said, I have $5 in my account, freaking out because she had no money to pay her bills. And her sponsor was a very wise woman and told her, she said, go out and give it to somebody who needs it worse than you. And she did. And she got back home and there was a check for $600 in her mailbox. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Reverend Helen Street, oh, she was such a dearly beloved minister. Angela knows her. I mean, she was so cool. She called, I've said this before, she called God the big sweetie. She said, God is our servant, and she said, I like to lay back on my satin cushion and tell God to peel me a grape. I just adore that. But one of the other things that she left with me, permanently imprinted on my brain, was that she had a client who was dying a terrible death of cancer. And he had been raised in a very dogmatic church and was terrified to die. And she said, I had to have him take out a gun and shoot his God because I needed to find a way to have him die more peacefully. So, is your God big enough for that kind of a makeover? Can we throw some of the crap out that you've been storing in your attic for all these years that is still disturbing you, but you maybe are even too afraid to even take it out and look at it for fear that you might be punished or that God's going to get you? What does your dream God look like? First of all, we know that we're here on a material plane and it doesn't work, does it? We can say, oh, if I could just get that job making this amount of money, if I could just get that health, if I could just have that relationship, if I could just have yada, 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 I'd be happy. But then you get the job and you realize how bad the company sucks. They treat their employees disrespectfully. They try to cheat you. They try to work you to death. You know, and you're like, what was I thinking? Then you get into this marvelous relationship and you fall in love with somebody and then you meet their dark side. And you're like, what was I thinking? How was I thinking this was going to make me happy? Or then you have like for me, last week I went to see my nephew who flew out from Florida. His company was recently bought out by a company in San Jose, and he was out for a 2-day training. So I drove to Monterey and met him, and we hung around all afternoon, and it was wonderful to get to see him. And so then I got back Tuesday night. I'd spent 5 hours in the car, of course, you know. And so I had a back spasm the other day, and it just knocked me clean off my feet. I'm recovering, but if I'm limping, you'll know why. It was bad. I hadn't had one that bad in a long time. But what I'm amazed at is I got in the car, I went and took care of it, I went to see my chiropractor, and then somebody came in and gave me some Norco, and I slept all afternoon the other day, and today I'm 100% better than what I was 2 days ago. I'm remembering all my notes on my knees. Or the other thing that we can get is like, if I could really just have a nice retirement, I'm kind of at that place. But you get it together, it's all there, and then the stock market crashes. You know, and you're like, you know, why me comes up, you know. But then some people make money their God. I mean, I know there's a lot of us that maybe know people who have done that. They're so terrified of not having security that they'll do anything to get worldly accumulations in order to try to protect themselves from the world. It's not going to work. It's not ever worked, and it's not going to work, because that's not who we are. That's not our reality. If you ever heard the saying, you know, things break down if it has moving parts. You know, I mean, you buy a brand new sweater, and moths are going to eat it in the closet. Or if you have to smell that horrible stuff coming out of the closet, you know, that everybody coughs around, and moth repellent. Or you buy something, and the nature of iron is it turns back into iron oxide right now. I mean, it starts rusting immediately. I can't even get my pan on the stove to dry before the thing starts rusting. It's amazing. So life is just, I think that we're consistently redirected toward where our reality, where our security, where our love really comes from. It's not going to come from people, because God bless all of our loved ones. They are afraid too. They have remnants of Jehovah and a punishing God, and they're scared to death that if they do anything that might disappoint, that you won't love us anymore with whatever scraps we're getting thrown off the table at us. If the love that we're looking for is our supreme beloved, that's where it is. And when that love is coming out of your heart and you're looking at everybody with the eyes of the love that you are, they change. They want to be around you. They're like, how did you get there? And it's called healing. It's called healing. So do you let God handle your problems? Or do you stress out trying to figure out, how am I going to accomplish that deadline? How am I going to, you know, the bill's due in 2 weeks and I don't have the money?